As many of you know, one of the things that the Trump Republican tax plan did is cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. But as many of you also know, and you would definitely know if you've been watching or listening to this show for a while, when we want to figure out how much taxes corporations actually pay, the tax rate is only one sort of factor. It's just one piece of it because there are so many mechanisms that can be used to reduce tax liability all the way down to zero, or sometimes even to get tax rebates from the government, which, if you're a corporation, usually end up getting applied against future profit rather than actually being sent back to you like a tax refund the way individuals get when they file taxes. And case in point, we already know of at least twice as many large corporations as last year who are paying zero in federal taxes under Donald Trump's new tax plan for corporations. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy has a new report out, and they found that the number of publicly traded companies that are paying zero or less in taxes, and I'll talk about the or less in a second, has roughly doubled. And some of these we've heard of because it's made headlines. So Amazon was one that made headlines. Netflix is one that made some headlines. Less commonly known, Chevron is another company, and there are others, in fact, 60 companies that have been identified that are paying zero or less in taxes for 2018 under Donald Trump's new tax plan. And as I mentioned, they're not just paying zero. These 60 companies in total that have been identified so far have secured $4.3 billion in rebates. And again, it's not that they get a check back because that's not how it works with these corporate rebates. They now are allowed in total to apply those $4.3 billion in rebates to future taxes on income. And that relates to why this is such an uphill long-term battle, which I will get to in a second here. And as far as the mechanism through which this is happening, it's not so much that Donald Trump's plan is all adding loopholes and new mechanisms to avoid taxes, although there are some. I mean, the Trump tax plan closed some, quote, loopholes, but also created some new ones and new mechanisms as well. But when you start with a 21% corporate tax rate instead of a 35% corporate tax rate, there's just a lot less tax that you have to find ways to zero out with accounting mechanisms to get to zero tax liability. So it allows more companies to do it, in this case, at least twice as many as for the 2017 tax year. When the rate was 35%, there was just more tax that you needed to find a way not to pay. Now, there's a common talking point from the right, which you might say, David, it sounds like it conflicts with what you're saying. I hear from the right that the United States corporate tax rate is one of the highest in the world. And it's true that 35% was, on paper, a relatively high rate. But again, the effective tax rate of American corporations is very low. And when you lower it to 21%, that is now definitely not any longer on the sort of higher end of the tax rate spectrum. And once again, corporations are still just not paying it. They are more easily able to completely zero out their tax liability altogether. So this now gets us to fixing the problem. Obviously, the corporate tax code needs to be completely changed. The corporate tax code was written by huge corporations and their lobbyists, and the sort of revolving door of elected official, lobbyist, corporate CEO types to be as advantageous to them as possible. And unfortunately, even if today we change the tax code to fix a lot of these problems, the accumulated rebates, which I told you about, that can be used to offset future earnings and taxes on earnings, are inevitably going to allow a lot of these corporations to keep paying zero or almost zero taxes even after we fix the problem, because they've accrued all of these rebates that can be applied against future income. So, breaking news, it's not trickling down, as many of you may have noticed. Number two, as far as Donald Trump and his campaign promises, disgustingly broken promises, right? He's not draining the swamp, he's filling the swamp. The tax reform plan is a total corporatocracy, which helps his own businesses as much as it helps many of those corporations associated with his cabinet, secretaries, and other people that work for him. And that lobbyist industrial complex that Donald Trump said he was going to end, he's done a few little things around the edges, which he can sort of claim victory on. But big picture, the status quo has simply not changed. And it's so funny because we've done all of this talking about Trump's promises and whether they're realistic, and the new tax plan and how it affects corporations, and what the next step is going to be in figuring out how many corporations are allowed to pay no taxes or not. In the end, there's literally nothing new here. Like, it's just the status quo. It's not trickling down. Corporations aren't paying taxes. Meanwhile, as I told you a couple days ago on the show, you have people who go out to eat figuring out how they can tip slightly less without looking cheap, because they can't even afford what cost of living has become. Meanwhile, the wait staff is saying, well, no, we need those extra tips. And you have the lower and middle class fighting while the big corporations are getting billions of dollars in tax rebates that they can apply to future tax years. This is how the system's designed. It's working exactly as the people in power have designed it. It's working exactly as anyone who saw through Donald Trump's promises knew that it was going to continue working, and that's it. It's almost like the news story today should be, hey guys, nothing's changed and corporations are still able to pay no taxes if they have good enough accountants and are taking advantage of the right mechanisms. That's it. It's almost like a non-story that is breaking today. Let me know what you think. I'm on Twitter at @dpakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show, and we have just a lot of great stuff planned for the Friday show today. Glad you're here. One of today's David Pakman Show sponsors is eStoreBuilt, who's giving everybody in our audience 20% off when you go to eStoreBuilt.com and use the promo code Pakman. And this part is awesome. They're also giving a portion of each purchase to Planned Parenthood and the ACLU. If you've been thinking about starting your own online store or upgrading the one you have, check out eStoreBuilt. It's a full-service set of solutions. They offer fully customized websites for your web store, instructional materials for improving your web store, low-cost accounting services for your web store. One web store created by eStoreBuilt was just recognized by beekedding.com as one of the top 25 best web stores of 2019. eStoreBuilt has team members specializing in everything from Shopify to social media marketing. They can help your business establish as an LLC, which is a great way to help protect your business from fraud and lawsuits. Their team of certified public accountants can take care of all your bookkeeping, your payroll, your electronic timekeeping, and provide other accounting consulting. Their accounting team is headed up by a certified management accountant with experience managing business budgets of over $75 million. Just go to eStoreBuilt.com. I've put a link under this video. Use promo code Pakman at checkout, Pakman, to get 20% off your entire order of eStore startup products and materials. And if you're interested in their affordable professional accounting services, just get in touch with them using their website contact form. Tell them David Pakman sent you, and you'll get 50% off your first month of accounting services when you sign up for a year subscription. And don't forget that they'll give a portion of all purchases to Planned Parenthood and the ACLU.